We lived in a log house when Bill and I were both preschool, and lived in a log house that it belonged to a neighbor. The neighbor decided he built a log house and let us live in it until he got married. And so we moved in that log house, and it had a chimney made out of clay, mud. And those chimneys, they would do good for about a year or so, and then they would dry out and have cracks, and they could catch a fire. That's a house on fire. And so this happened on this particular day, a cold winter day, and a guy was coming down the road, and he saw our house on fire, and he stopped and helped us get out and put the little fire. It wasn't a big fire. Put the fire out. But what amazes me is that this was about 85 years ago, probably, and he was driving a wagon that was pulled by two yokes of oxen. That's how old I am. I reached back into the oxygen age and up to the jet age. But I thought that was something that was so unusual to think about, being at my age, remembered oxen. That house was about 2 miles from the church, and we would walk. We would walk to church, but most nights, or somebody might bring us home, and we get home, and oh, there was not a lock in the parish. I don't imagine, not a lock in the province hall for sure. And so he just pushed open the door, and Billy was little, and he would say, "Somebody build a fire in the lamps." And so somebody would build a fire in the lamps, and that log house, it had a ceiling on the walls, but overhead it was galvanized metal up there where the tin was. And in the wintertime, when you built a fire in that little old trash burner heater, after the fireplace fell down, we bought a little trash burner heater. That's a little thin walled metal round heater. Put pine knots in that thing, and when you get warmed up, and it would dance, and it would sound like thunder almost, and the pipe would get hot all the way up to the roof, but it would rain because the heat went up against that metal, and it would rain in on us. But we had something called comforters that the government had helped people get. You'd go to this place, and they'd make these comforters. It was like a quilt, except it was thick and soft. Oh, it was so good to pull that stuff up over your head and sleep soundly all night in the cold with that heater going and that rain raining. But it was a great time of our lives. Bill and I both had whooping cough during that time we lived in that house, and Mom would say one would cough, then the other would start coughing, and that was, you don't have whooping cough anymore. That's been taken care of by injections or whatever you call that, So, but we had the whooping cough, and every time we had something, we both had it. It was a dual thing, and most people really thought we were twins when we were that age. When we were up to school age, they thought we were twin kids. We were. I'm a little over 2 years older than Bill, and so we lived in that log house until, guess what? The guy that built it for us, he decided to get married, and he married my dad's double first cousin, Alta Thornton. And so, guess what? We had to move out of that log house, and Dad had planted a garden. We had all kind of vegetables in that garden, and we had to go away from it. So there was the road. Going by the road, you had to go 2 miles up the Provencal, and then about a mile going to the east, I guess it was. And there was no vehicles, but somebody came in a wagon and moved our big stuff, our big furniture, our 2 chairs and our table and our bed, 2 beds, and stove, and moved that for us. but we had to carry the other stuff. But so instead of going through town, you could go through the woods. And we went through the woods, but there's a Provencal Creek was between us and that other house we were going to move in. And so carrying watermelons wasn't too fun going over that. When you got to that creek, you had to walk a log. And me and Bill were just little old kids, you know. Dad had a log. He had a watermelon under each arm walking. And that, you know, it was probably like well over a mile where we're going. And he carried watermelons under his arms, and he'd go back and get a basket full of corn and all that stuff. We had to move our stuff. Well, we moved into a brand new house made out of rough pine lumber, and it belonged to a man by the name of George Moss. George Moss drove a school bus, and he was a barber. And so I was in the first grade, and Dad used to cut hair on Sunday evenings. He would charge, I think, 20 cents or 15 cents to cut hair on the front porch with a pair of old hand clippers. But evidently he wasn't able to do it. So Mom told me to go to George Moss and get my hair cut. Well, what you did, you would ride his bus all around his route, and you'd go to his house, and he had a little room, and he cut your hair. Well, here, Mama says, you go get your hair cut. She gave me whatever it was for the money. And I got on the bus and rode it, got off the bus, got in the barber chair, and George Moss said, Junior, who's your girlfriend? And I said, Patsy Ray. That Patsy Ray was his daughter. He said, I'm fixing to cut your ears off. And I thought he was serious. Oh, but I think I started crying. He had to tell me it wasn't real, you know, because that didn't sound good about him getting a pair of scissors after my ears. But that was the story of the haircut. And she was a pretty little girl. She was my first girlfriend. She didn't know it. But that was in first grade. I want to go back and talk about the house then that finally we got our own house, and it was a paid-for house, and Dad was making $3 a day plus $1.50 for room and board. And we had a 2-bedroom house with a bath, but no bathroom fixtures because it was during the war. You couldn't buy bathroom fixtures. He got enough wire to wire the house, but they couldn't hook us up to electricity because they couldn't get power for the power. It was in Provencal. They had electricity there, but they couldn't get the service lines to serve your house. So we used lamps in that house until we moved away from there. But he built this house, and inside was like what you call that? It's like ceiling beadboard, you know, with little things in it all over. The overhead, all the walls done with that. And oh my goodness, we were uptown. Daddy bought a propane, a butane, they call it then, butane tank, and a gas cook stove, and a gas heater. We were just uptown, I'm telling you. It was very, very good. No ice box, no refrigerator. We had an ice box. And the iceman would come by, and we'd buy ice and put it in the ice box, keep the milk cold and stuff. But no appliances. You couldn't buy appliances. So then we moved eventually in 1947. That was a very hard time for us. That's when Papa Cullen Haymon passed away one early Monday morning after he had preached. He had preached in Shreveport. He was pastoring 2 churches. Pastored in Shreveport, which is now King's Temple in Shreveport, and Provencal Church. And working, he was building houses and stuff. And he was a presbyter with the PALJC organization, which was merged eventually with what was the name of the other organization? PCI, Pentecostal Church Incorporated. They merged in 1945. But my grandpa Cullen was the superintendent of the Louisiana district of the PFJC. So he was a very, very, very busy man. But he always had time seemed like for everybody. He was born in 1890. He passed away in 1947 at 57 years old. He started at least 12 churches in Louisiana. He had 3 children by his first wife and 9 children by his second wife. But he always seemed to have time for others. My dad was drafted in the Navy in 1944, March of 1944. My sister Carol was 6 months old when he was drafted. So Dad was drafted. He had 3 children, and he was 33 years old. And he was inducted into the Navy. Went to San Diego, trained there, and they were preparing for invasion of Japan, the mainland, and they were drafting every human being they could get to go, and it was going to be a terrible, bloody battle thing. And jumping ahead just for a minute, but Harry Truman used the atomic bombs, and the Japanese surrendered. In the meantime, my dad went and served, and he served aboard several different ships, and he was a motor machinist mate running the boats amphibious boats that landed troops on Okinawa. And Dad tells a story of that situation when they were attacking Okinawa. A huge storm came in, and they had to go out to sea to save the ships. And Dad was on something called an LST. That's a landing ship tank. It hauled tanks. They had an apron on the front, dropped down, and the vehicles could go off into the water and go up on the beach. And my dad said that while they were out to sea in this horrible storm, this ship began to break up. And they had welders welding cracks that were cracking in the bulkheads of that ship. 24 hours a day welding, trying to keep that ship from breaking up. And that's when he said he promised the Lord that when he got home, he would serve him. And he did come home in 1946, but it was in 1948 before he received the Holy Ghost. There's a story about that. The night my mother received the Holy Ghost in 1937, and the little Catholic girl, and she was so excited about it. She was telling my dad how wonderful it was and how good it was to have the Holy Ghost. And he told her, well, he said, when I get ready for it, I can get it in 10 minutes. And it was 10 years later and he went to the altar some during that 10 years, but it was 10 years before he received the Holy Ghost. And what a change it made in all of our lives.